All right, we are ready to start. Welcome, everyone. If you are just coming in, please drop your name and organizational affiliation in the chat. I am one of your trainers today. I'm Renee Angelo Mock, and you are here for our program orientation and Mentor 101 training. Really, the trainer. You being the trainer, the person bringing this information back to your organization. This is something that our programs have asked of us for a while. People reach out and need training for their mentors. So that's why we created this training here at Mentor Maryland, DC. And if you're not familiar with us, you are about to get to know us as you work through some of these beginning slides. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dakota, for our next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dakota Shamblin, and I'm currently the Program Outreach Vista. I know quite a few of you in here by name and face. So today we're going to get into a few main resources that a lot of you have probably already heard of, but just want to give you a few reminders of what we have to offer. We have the elements of effective practice for mentoring, and what we're going to get into a little bit more today is the training component of best practices for offering training for your mentors. And then we have a link here for some of our upgoing and ongoing trainings for mentoring programs. And so this is just a link to our events that we have upcoming. And then we have a link to our past trainings and webinars. So those are all on our website. And then as well on here, our NMRC website has also been updated most recently. And as well on there, there's also a resource assessment tool, which is really awesome. You get to go in there and do a sort of assessment to establish what resources you already have. And it'll also lead you to resources that you may not have, and that could be really helpful for you. And then there's a link to our Nationals website, who has an awesome, pretty comprehensive website with some toolkits, webinars, guides, stuff like that on there. So we can go to the next slide. So this slide just gives you a little bit of an overview for those who don't know us. We are an affiliate to the larger mentoring national partnership called Mentor National. And basically our shared mission is to increase the quality and quantity of mentoring relationships across Maryland. And we do that by offering quality, quantity, and upholding or elevating the field. So quality work, we offer, again, trainings. That's a big bulk of what we do. We also offer technical assistance and consulting. We also have quality assessment tools. And in our quantity bucket, we have mentoring recruitment tools, such as the Mentoring Connector. If you're not in there already, I highly recommend. We have done campaigns for mentor recruitment. We also want to build up those mentoring relationships. So we also have, with Elevating the Field, we do advocacy campaigns. We do Capitol Hill Day with programs during National Mentoring Month. And really, we just want to be the face of mentoring for Maryland, as well as DC now, because we have expanded, if you haven't heard yet. We can go to the next slide. This is our team. Two of us are here today, Renee and I. We also have Olivia James, our Marketing and Communications Vista. We have Antoine Baguette, who is our Baltimore City Schools Mentoring Pilot Vista. And we have Sada, our Operations Manager, and Sadiq Ali, our awesome Executive Director. We can go to the next slide. Sorry, I have a little bit of a congestion. I went over this a little bit, but these are just some of our other resources that we got up there. We have our technical assistance through the NMRC website, our mentoring connector. There's our events webpage. We also have the EEP. The NQMS is the quality assessment that I was talking about. There's also a link to funding opportunities, as well as if you're a new program or you're a person who's trying to start a program, there's a module on our Mentor Nationals website that you can check out. And I think that's it for me. I'll pass it back to Renee.
Thanks. So these are just a few tools on how we can connect during this training. This training requires your participation. We want this to be a back and forth, even though this is a resource we're bringing to you. We want to know about you and ensure that this resource is relevant to the work that you are doing on the front line. When you host a training, or if you have hosted trainings, you want people to participate. So we're trying to build that in now. If you're not familiar with the reactions and things like that, raising your hand if you want to speak. And of course, the chat is always an option. I've been loving, you can actually like change these emojis and things now. So I encourage playing around with the reactions for sure. It's really fun and an easy way for you to get involved, and just so that we know that, yeah, we're all on the same page as we're moving through. So I do want to start with who is here. As you know, me and Dakota from Metro Maryland, DC, but where's everyone from? What is your role in mentor training? So I'm going to have Dakota launch a Zoom poll that you should see pop up. And for these, you have the option to click multiple answers if multiple things apply to you. So feel free to do that. We'll give you guys a minute. The question is, what is your role with mentor training at your program? And up in the chat too. What is your role with mentor training at your program? And again, you can have multiple answers. And then there's a fun question about what is your favorite summer treat, which I was asked in a meeting the other day, and I was very interested to hear people's answers. So a little icebreaker for us. And I'm deeply invested in summer frozen desserts. So I like to know where people are coming from. Yeah. All right. I'm waiting for one more person, and then I'll share the results. Cool. Y'all are on top of it. I love it. Okay. So just about everyone here trains mentors. Perfect. You are our exact audience. We love it. I'm so glad you were here. Appreciate you. And then a lot of you also make decisions about training for mentoring too. So that is superb. Decision makers, we're always glad when they're here with us. And many of us are also working alongside those mentors and volunteers or helping programs. Oh, it's so interesting. I did not expect like everyone to say ice cream. Italian ice is down there. That would probably be my choice. Interesting. I'm gonna save that question for polls for the rest of this summer. Yeah, thank you guys for letting us know. This will help us to inform, the information we're going to share in the rest of this training. Thank you. All right. And so now we also want to see, how is it going? I doubt anyone's, or perhaps a few of you guys here have not had mentor trainings in your program. That's fine. There's no judgment. I just kind of want to see, how is it going? Be honest, we want to level set like where everyone is coming from, and how is it going thus far? So we're going to launch another Zoom poll. And for a few of these questions, you do have the options to click more than one answer. So does your program currently have a training in place for new mentors? Some of you may be coming from newer programs, maybe not. If you do not have a mentor training in place, why not? Budget, capacity, you have well-qualified mentors. If it doesn't apply to you, but maybe budget and capacity are still issues, feel free to click those as well. And then if you do have a training, how's it going? Is it awesome? Are you so happy? Things are going great? Is it just okay? Or maybe, again, it doesn't apply to you. So we'll give about 20 more seconds, waiting on about 5 people to vote. And I will ask some of you to share out, if you don't mind, once we have all of our results. Okay. Waiting on 1 or 2 people. All right, I'm going to share these results out. So just about over half of us have trainings in place, which is great. Again, this is no judgment whatsoever. We know this is the need of programs, and that's why we made this. So happy that you're here. For those who do not, budget and capacity seems to be the biggest issue, which I might have guessed, having come from a mentor program, been somebody who trains mentors often in the past. So I totally understand that. If you do have a training, people are feeling pretty good. So for those with capacity issues, would anybody like to speak to that? Drop in the chat, raise your hand, unmute yourself. I'd just like to hear about where we're coming from as far as capacity and what the perceived capacity gap is for you. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. I work for Liberty's Promise, and we just did our first pilot mentorship program this year, kind of like moving in new directions during the pandemic to try to support the youth that we work with more. So basically, it's not actually in anyone's job description to do a mentorship program. So it took a couple of us, working when we had free time to kind of develop and implement it. So in the initial pilot program, we didn't have a real training, more just like a quick orientation and get to know each other kind of thing. So that's something we're looking to set up before we start our next round of mentoring.
Great, and you make such a good point. When mentor programs are starting, this is a common area that gets kind of left behind. And we're understanding of that, and that's why we want to have this resource for you also for the future, that those things are already there for you. And again, most people are saying that things are pretty good and that there are some gaps. Does anybody want to speak to some of the gaps they feel that their training has right now? Or what gaps you're trying to fill? Maybe that feedback's come from mentors, or maybe it's an observed gap from your experience as a trainer. Feel free to drop it in the chat.
So I am in Frederick County. I work for Woman to Woman Mentoring. So we actually do mentoring for 18 to 35-year-old women in our county. And we've, every year been refining our training, but so we don't have some of the things that youth programs have to deal with of, working with a minor aged person. But, it's so hard to help mentors understand like the individualized thing that we're looking for from them, of like, here are some things that your mentee could be dealing with or whatever, but how do we say like, well, yours is a single mom and yours is a college grad and yours is applying for a master's program and yours is just recently not homeless. Like it really, we don't have, it's like if you're 18 to 35 and live, work, or go to school in our county. So it's such a broad range, and I feel like I'm not sure how to help them understand how to tailor what we're helping them learn to, who their mentee happens to be. But I don't know how that even exists, but that's where I'm always like, that's a thing that I just don't know how to express to them until they've met their mentees, what they would need to know.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And for some of us, it's very specific, and for others not. So how to adjust accordingly. And we'll get into how you can personalize this for your program. So hopefully that will be a resource of you, Amy. Thank you for sharing. All right. Cool. So for us, we're starting from the beginning, from the foundation of why should programs, mentoring programs, anybody that's working with youth, have training for their volunteers. And this goes back to the element of effective practice that Dakota referred to earlier. There are 6 standards in the EEP, the element of effective practice, and training falls under standard 3. The EEP for the National Mentoring Partnership and the mentor affiliates across the USA is the basic standards of, standards of practice for programs. So these are the minimum things that we want to ensure that your program is effective and your program is not causing harm and things like that. So again, standard 3 is all about training. I recently did a training about the EEP, so if you were there, you may be able to recall it, but we based our Mentor 101 to make sure we're hitting all those standards and the enhancements. So if you haven't read the EEP, definitely worth a read. We'll be sure to send it out with the rest of the materials. But know that we're holding this training to that standard, so you can ensure that when you apply this for your mentors, you are abiding those standards. And then I just want to review this quickly. These are the core principles that make up the foundation of the entire EEP. When we go through the rest of this training, you should be able to see these principles interwoven throughout. And as you might be adding things and adding slides, when you implement this training, just think about making sure that you're hitting these core principles and that they're included. So for mentors to be trustworthy and responsible, to act with integrity, to honor youth and family voice in designing and delivering services, promoting justice for young people, respecting the young person's right to dignity, and promoting the safety and welfare of the young person, and striving for equity, cultural responsiveness, and positive social change. So again, these are things that we want to make sure we're communicating to mentors either directly or with everything else that we're talking about in that initial training. So if you're not familiar with a specific standard from the EEP, this is exactly it, ripped exactly from it. So the standard is a program should train prospective mentors in the basic knowledge and skills needed to build an effective mentoring relationship. It sounds simple enough, but we all know with time and capacity, it's not always that simple. So we're talking about at least 2 hours of training pre-match. So before they're interacting with students, that is important. And you'll see that our training includes these topics: program rules, expectations, the role, how to sustain your relationship, how to handle challenges, and then outlining match closure as well. So, and that'll be specific to your program. And then the enhancement is a program provides more than 2 hours of pre-match training and covers additional topics such as cultural competency and youth development, which you will see addressed in this training we prepared for you all. So this again, ripped from the EEP, is about policy and procedural manual. And while of course we hope that you have one for your own program, having one for mentors as well can be really key. So besides that mentors love takeaways and having documents that they can refer to, it helps ensure that expectations are very clear and that they have another resource to ask questions. Because if you, for those who have been in volunteer and mentor management, if you have 50 mentors and every week half of them are asking questions, that's a lot of time in management. So again, having a good referring document can be really helpful to you and for your mentors. So you really can't go wrong. And it's something that I would encourage you to provide to your mentors when they come to this training. I'm going to hand it over to Dakota if you're going to transition into, well, she'll introduce our transition.
Yes, so this is a two-part sort of training, and we estimate it to be about 3 hours because the first part is a program orientation, and then the second part is the actual Mentor 101 training. So the first part is really much a plug and play. So a lot of it you'll see are highlighted, and the highlighted pieces are where you're going to insert your very specific information for your program. So you'll see the first part's approximately about 90 minutes. And there's 2 decks. One's more of like, I guess you could call like a pretty deck. I customize it to look kind of nice, and there's icons and it's kind of colorful and pretty and nice. And there's one that's very much black and white, and you can design it however you think it looks good for your program, or maybe you have certain logos and designs that you've already created for your PowerPoints and stuff, and that's what that's meant for. So Renee's going to kind of go into the program orientation part, and then I'm going to dig into the more 2-hour portion of what the Mentoring 101 piece is. And obviously I'm not going to go as far in depth because there is a facilitation guide that goes more into depth of what the pieces that you're actually going to be discussing. And so I'm going to lightly touch on it. And then if there's anything that you want me to dig a little deeper in or explain a little farther, then by all means, in the chat, ask a question or raise your hand, and then we'll dig a little deeper. But yeah, like I said, Renee's going to go a little bit more over the program orientation side. So back to you.
Yeah. So right, we are going through the deck that we will be handing over to you at the end of this training. Here we are. Who are you? Orientation to your program is really important. And like Dakota said, you can add your own branding to all this as well. But a mentor needs to know about you first, so they can then get to know about what mentoring is and what that means for your program. Introductions, of course, making it a space that people feel welcome. Getting to know each other, building community among mentors can be really key for mentor longevity as well. And adjust this accordingly. We would love if you give us a shout out. That's helping out to develop this for you guys, so that is in there. Who's the team? Who might your mentor be interacting with? They're likely only meeting one of you at this training. The more mentors feel connected to your program, the more likely they'll want to maintain their relationship and their longevity in your program. So it's not just about their relationship with their mentee, but their relationship with your program as well. So let them know who are those people, put in their pictures, their name, what do they do for the program. So they also know maybe if they have certain questions, who to direct those questions to as well. This is your opportunity to introduce the whole team that makes the program happen for the mentor and for the students as well. An agenda, basic thing of instructional design, let people know what we're going through. So in this orientation, logistics, everything about the program, mission, vision, policy, procedures, how's it going, monitoring, all those basic things. So we've assumed this will probably be a virtual training. If it's not going to be, obviously edit this accordingly. Yeah, and I would say hold the same virtual etiquette that you would for your students, for your mentors as well, and communicate that. So these are our objectives, which again are a key part of kind of that adult learning. So letting people know what they're going to learn up front, so they're expecting to receive the information. So for this part of the orientation, again, history and mission, learn about the youth, how you'll be doing it, how the program is designed, and the importance of monitoring. An icebreaker, adjust accordingly. This is one that's been successful for us in the past, and what's worked for you guys as well. This could be an opportunity to do an icebreaker that you've also done with the kids, so you can kind of help the mentor connect to the experiences of the youth in your program. And then you can also naturally kind of share a story about kids and the mentees in your program. And I will say mentors love hearing stories about, actual students. Who are you? Everybody loves an origin story. Every TV show now is an origin story of somebody else we've already watched in a TV show. So, give that history. And if you're not familiar with your program's history, because it was long before you, get familiar with it. This also helps you sell your program. So let mentors know, how did this program come to be? And then why is it important that your program exists? This is your opportunity to let mentors know that. How does your program work? This will help mentors understand their role in the grand scheme of your program, especially if your program isn't just a straight mentoring program. If your program offers other things, let mentors know that. They want to know what the kids they're working with are experiencing, and then maybe also there's another aspect of your program that a mentor could see themselves helping out with in a different volunteer role. So, let mentors know the whole scope, and not just what their role is, but what is your whole program doing? How does it function in the community, and why is that important? The mission, vision, and goals. It's important for these mentors to be aware of these things. While these may be very high level, likely nobody here is writing the mission and vision for their organization, especially if it's a larger organization. But if mentors don't see the connection between what they're doing with their mentees and the organizational goal, they might get kind of lost in the sauce. Mentoring programs need a guiding mission statement that clearly describes why your program exists. And this is an opportunity for your mentor to see how they're connected to it, how it's affected on the community level, and how they're connected to the goals, and help not only for the goals for their mentee, but the goals for the program as well. So this might be a little bit more difficult for Amy, but Amy, for you, this might be the opportunity to talk about the breadth of the experience for the people that your mentors may be working with. So if your program works with a specific youth that meet certain standards and things like that, be sure to communicate that. But we now want to take the opportunity to remind you guys to be mindful about how we're speaking about youth and what kind of narrative we're sharing. This is really, really important. We're talking about cultural humility and talking about communities and things like that. Besides that, we're trying to welcome people in. We want to give people accurate descriptions that won't also potentially lead to bias or an opportunity for bias. So be very mindful when you're sharing a narrative about your students. And then additionally, pictures. We love pictures. People love to see happy children. I will say, be mindful. Do you have the appropriate release forms for photos? Do kids and families understand how their photos are being used? This is really important, and we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and a parent doesn't walk in and see a photo of their kid somewhere and be like, why is this photo of the kid being shown to a bunch of adults? So be mindful of that before on the front end. And then if there is an option to have a mentee present, or a video of a mentee, talking about themselves and their role and their experience in the program, that might be an opportunity as well. And let the kids, literally have their voice into the program and into the training, and let them speak for themselves. So mentors love details, and this is your opportunity to give them as many details as possible. And again, to start that clarity of expectations. Some of these things maybe they already know before coming in, but reiterate it so it is as clear as possible as far as the length of screening procedures, what orientation and pre-training consists of, forms, documents, all those kinds of things, evaluations. Time commitment is extremely important. As clear as you can be about it, even if your program is flexible, be clear about what those flexibility options are, because I know that your program has goals about hours, about number of mentors coming in, about frequency. Communicate that and let them, again, if it's flexible, be clear about how they can help, meet those goals and meet the expectations, but be as clear as possible. And then we're going to talk about responsibilities here and then on the next slide as well. So I was talking about takeaways earlier, things mentors can take with them, but an actual position description for your mentors is ideal. This again helps to clarify expectations as clearly as possible. So, your role, and again, that position description is connected back to your vision, mission, and goals for your organization. So again, helping your mentor be as connected to your organization as large as well. And then also they understand what their expectations are. That as a mentor, maybe your STEM program, they know as a mentor, maybe it's not for them to be communicating everything about STEM, but to be, encouraging their mentee to learn something new. So making that as clear as possible. So we're not setting our mentors up to think that they're about to, solve a child's life problems or things like that. But they know exactly what their role is. It's clear. And then again, hopefully after this, they're going to feel prepared. And then, program boundaries. What are the minimum standards of safety? What is supervision like? What does that mean? What is the mentor's role in ensuring safety? Because on the program side, you guys have many things to do to ensure minimum safety standards. But on the mentor side, what is the mentor's role in ensuring that everyone is safe? Policies and procedures. We talked about having a procedure manual earlier. This is a great time to ideally hand that out and go over those things. What is your mandated reporting policy? Pro tip, there is a online mandatory reporter training on the Baltimore Child Abuse Center website that anybody can register for. But if you have a certain policy, that needs to be communicated as well. Social media policy, again, with photos and releases, being sure that that's clear on both ends for kids and families and for mentors as well. Reporting absences, who do they talk to? Is there an expectation about avoiding absences and things like that? Family and communication and outside of program communication, that is going to be very specific to your program. But it's a question that mentors are often already thinking about and asking about, so let them know. And then again, supervision, which goes back to safety, but as specific as possible. Number of adults, children-based types of adults, whether those adults are volunteers or staff, being observable. If you have questions about child safety and things like that, there are, again, great trainings on the Baltimore Child Abuse website about those kind of minimum standards for supervision and things like that. And you might have expectations with your grants and funders as well. So something to think about and to communicate clearly with mentors so they know, what their role is in ensuring safety. Who should they be talking to? So we talked about introducing your staff earlier. Reiterate here, who is their person for what? So who should they be contacting about screening questions? Who should they be contacting with, if they're concerned with their match? Who should they contact if they need to miss a session? Give that information here. And again, this is great in a takeaway as well. So they have that contact information. And then FAQs. So for those of you who have been doing training, you probably know what your most frequently asked questions are, and you can either put them in a slide like this or address them, add them into the training on your own. These are some questions that we know come up a lot, gifts and mentors feeling insecure about what relationship building really looks like and what that experience is like. So you want to be, oh my goodness. Okay. We want to be sure that you are making this space as comfortable as possible for mentors to ask questions. I find that an FAQ slide lets mentors know that they're not the only one thinking of that question, and gives them more permission to ask a question. So I think that is kind of a bonus to having an FAQ slide instead of just a space to ask questions, because again, mentors may feel nervous about, oh, I'm thinking about this, but maybe I'm just not done, I'm dumb, or I'm not ready, or I'm nervous. So we want to make sure that we're making as many spaces as possible for mentors to ask questions, because getting those questions answered up front will decrease the opportunity for disruptions in mentoring relationships and things later on. So this will be a really important part to wrap up orientation, which is where we are. So do we have any, before we move into the kind of 101, do we have any questions about doing program orientations, or do you guys have any best practices for your program orientations that you've been doing so far? Feel free to drop in the chat, come off mute. All right. So again, let us know in the chat, but we're going to move in kind of the 101 of how to be an effective mentor. And I'm going to turn it over to Dakota.
Thank you, Renee. That was great. So before we get into the actual slides, I did want to give you guys a chance to look at the facilitation guide that we have created. And we also created one for the program orientation part. Again, you're able to kind of customize this to how you want, add in, take out what you think is necessary. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, Renee, and then when I'm done, you can kind of put yours back up there. But let me. All right. I hope you guys are able to see that on me. All right, so it's just a Word doc, and if it'll load here. So we have basically the objectives and materials that you may need with virtual. Obviously, you're not going to need very much materials, just an updated version of whatever digital platform you're using really is all you need, and just any links that you may need to videos. Also, we like to use music at the beginning of all our trainings to start off on a good vibe. So I have the links to that as well. But this is just how we laid out, trying to make it as organized and easy to read as possible. It does look a little intimidating, I guess, right there. But if you look to the left, that's just timing. Timing is very helpful with an action-packed schedule for a training like this. So this just help you, again, this is just an estimate for time, but as you find when you start doing trainings more often, usually your estimate of time is pretty correct, and it always kind of helps just to know what track you're on. And you have your slides to the right. I like to set it up like this. This is just a general, this is what you're supposed to say, welcoming the mentors. Again, this doesn't have to be word for word. This is just general, especially if you're just starting off with trainings and you haven't necessarily done too many before. This is super helpful in just helping you guide how to go from here. The bold is just for the topics of the slides. And then you have some instructions. The asterisks are just things to keep in mind, or certain things to do, like debrief a video, or a reminder for, this is the perfect time to give context on why your program came to be when we're talking about program orientation pieces. So then we get down to the mentoring 101. Again, you might have materials for a certain section. It just goes along like this. I won't take you through it all, but I just wanted to give you a general overview of what it kind of looked like so you have an idea. There's a lot of great information. It's pretty jam-packed with stuff, so it's kind of exciting if you're into it, but I'll stop sharing and we can get back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, and before we go back, I'll say I love, as a facilitator, I was introduced to that template many years ago, and it is extremely useful. You may apply it to future trainings. Again, as you edit, be sure to, excuse me, be sure to make your edits into the facilitation guide as well. It's a great resource. And like Dakota said, it's great for when you're unfamiliar with doing a training, but then as you get more familiar and you need to revisit, and just becomes a guide that you refer to, and then you're like, oh yeah, it's so useful to have. So definitely make use of that. You will enjoy. Is my screen right, Dakota?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, cool.
See it? All right. So this is the mentoring 101, how to be effective mentoring. And like I said a little earlier, I'll be kind of touching lightly on each topic. And if there's anything that you'd like a little bit more clarification, or like me go to a little deeper on, please ask me. Some of the topics are pretty basic that we've all talked about, like having empathy, asking open-ended responses, communicating well, stuff like that, pretty basic. But then we also get into a little harder topics like bias, adultism, white saviorism. Those we might want to talk a little bit more in depth on. Definitely bring that to our attention, and we would definitely go more in depth with that. We can go to the second slide. Also, I'd like to say that we have not incorporated in the facilitation guide any breaks, but obviously in between the orientation and the training, you can do a break. Or if you're just doing the training in one session, incorporate breaks as you see fit. We definitely recommend, a 5-minute break at least in between these sessions, just because it is kind of intensive and long. But again, to your discretion.
Right. And maybe your orientation is happening at a totally different time than your 101. So judge accordingly for what works for your program and your program's capacity.
Okay. So we got an agenda here. These are just some of the topics I will be talking about. Again, expectations, the role, tasks, approaches, communication, boundaries. We're going to talk a lot about trauma, and I'll get into why I think that's critical and important based on research. And also we're going to end on roadblocks to creating those supportive relationships, and also talking about white saviorism and how to have conversations about race, which is critically important. And when we say that we want you to customize this to what you think is relevant and important, we do encourage you, if you do not use these certain topics in the first training that you do with mentors, we encourage you to include them in at least ongoing trainings that you do with mentors. We can go to the next slide. These are just some learning objectives. Again, these are just a few. We could definitely add in a lot more because there's a lot of content in these. But these are just, again, a few. The scope and the limits of your role as a mentor, approaches, how to set boundaries, effective communication, and how to support young people in the wake of violence and trauma. Next slide. Another icebreaker. We won't do this one, although I'd love to hear a song, maybe, or book that describes your mentoring style. I think this is just an easy one to kind of dig out of people, things that they can identify about themselves, that qualities of a mentor, I guess. Yeah, drop in the chat as we continue along. You can go to the next slide. So expectations and mentoring. This is something that you should definitely start before the mentoring relationship has even started or initiated. The main reason why any relationship fails is because of lack of communication and unmet expectations. So when you're in a training and you have all these questions, it's important that you're kind of digging out of mentors, you're asking them questions. What do you expect to gain from this relationship? What expectations do you have for your mentee going into this relationship? And kind of hash out, are these realistic expectations? Look for any red flags, maybe these expectations these mentors have are a little bit of self-serving, and, have them kind of review their expectations and kind of see if they're appropriate for the mentor and mentee relationship. So we can go to the next one.
Yeah, great point. But I just want to add, the reason that training is suggested for matching is because essentially training could be an extra layer of screening for you, right? If things that are super problematic are coming up about a month during this training, maybe they're not a great fit, or maybe by the end of this training, you find that they're coachable, willing to learn, and will be able to be, coached and supervised appropriately moving on. So know that that's why that's the best practice, and that's why those things we aim to include those and are the enhancements for this kind of training.
Thank you. So here's a quote. There's a few quotes kind of scattered through this, and this is an opportunity to kind of have somebody from the audience, read the quote, and then also ask them, what resonates with you. Ask them if they kind of agree with this. Again, what resonates with you. This quote is really important because this is an expectation that you sort of have for the mentors. A mentee is not your little mini me. You're helping your mentee, reach their goals and helping them to understand what they want for their life. You're meeting them where they're at, and again, helping them to understand what their dreams are for their life. And so again, we want a lot of group participation. We want it to be interactive. So with each topic, with each slide, asking a question, having a response, and then asking follow-up questions. Maybe there's something in the chat that somebody's added to the conversation and there's a follow-up to that, and asking them to elaborate, maybe taking them off mute if they're comfortable. You want them to really dig into them a little bit, not in a harsh way, but if they're comfortable, spurring conversation so you can have that peer learning opportunity. You can go to the next slide. So what is a mentor? Again, this is just a good opportunity to ask them, how many of you have had a mentor? And then asking, what qualities of that mentor helped you to build sort of that trusting relationship? What did they do that, let you know that you could trust them? You're helping them to really identify qualities not only in other people, but also in themselves that allowed them to build trusting relationships. This is also a point where you could do a poll everywhere. So you've probably seen those word clouds where people, they'll text a certain number, or they'll get on a website and they'll put in words that are certain qualities of a mentor. And so it'll populate and it'll make it look real pretty. This is an option that you could do here, or you could just have them do it in the chat. The poll everywhere is kind of prettier if you do it like that. But again, this is what you're trying to help them identify qualities in themselves, sort of encourage them as they go into that relationship to bring up those qualities, to build that trust in that relationship, because that's really the foundation of cultivating a supportive relationship, is building that trust. And so again, having somebody read this out loud, asking them what resonates. Did we leave something out of this definition? Is there something that you would add to this? Yeah, but again, allowing space for mentors to share with one another is really the best way for understanding and learning. So we can go on to the next. So mentor roles, you've probably seen this chart a few times. If not, this is a pretty popular way of defining what a mentor is and what a mentor is not. You could pick a few from here. You could also add on to this chart. This is a chart created within PowerPoint. So you could pick a few that relate to your program specifically, but basically, these are professions that you could obviously have outside of being a mentor, but your role in this relationship is a mentor. So you're a friend, a coach, a nurturer of possibilities, a motivator, advisor, but you're not a parent, a teacher, a disciplinarian, psychologist, ATM machine, all of these things. And so it's important when you're training mentors that you make those distinctions between the two, and you give them an explanation as to why you aren't these things, and why, if you try to be these things, what the outcome could be and why it could be detrimental to that relationship. But really, the top two things that we like to bring out of this that a mentor is, or that mentees say they want out of a mentor, is for a mentor to be authentic and non-judgmental, and a good listener as well, which we'll get into when we talk a little bit about empathy. But it's really about relationships. Oh, okay, sorry. But mentoring is all about relationships, and it takes time. So if you're in a position to truly give your time, but if you aren't able to see your mentee due to conflict, take the time to write a note, because that has a lasting impact. Okay, we can go to the next one. Yeah, mentor tasks. So this is another opportunity where we can have mentors dig a little deeper into what these tasks are and how we can exhibit these tasks. So establish a positive and personal relationship with your mentee. Ask how we can establish that positive personal relationship. How have they established those relationships with other people? Also developing life skills, help them to identify what life skills those are and how we can establish them. Those additional resources that mentees might need. So, sorry, I have really bad congestion. But establishing those life skills and how we can assist in doing so. So again, digging that out of them, group share, peer sharing, and then increasing mentees' ability to interact with people's groups, things from various backgrounds. A good example of this is taking them to art museums, festivals, religious activities. Oh, okay. Just a moment. Hey, Renee, could you take over for a second? My voice is like,
Yeah. You're fine. All right. I think we've gone over mentor tasks. Again, some of these may more specific to your program, but we're talking about, in this section, we're talking about, mentoring as a concept and based on research about, what effective mentors do and what they look like. So you may find some of these things speak to the approaches that you use in your program, make those connections here so they seem as real and as doable as possible. We're talking about assisting a mentee in identifying additional resources. What does that mean for your program? Is that as simple as helping a kid get homework help? Or does your program allow for mentors to include them with resources outside of the program and things like that? So keep that in mind, that we want to connect these things back to the context of your program. And that here we're speaking more to mentoring as, a subject matter. Cool. So we included trauma in this presentation because we want to acknowledge the prevalence of it and the impact trauma has on young people and the role that mentors can play in healing-centered communities and healing-centered relationships. So it's not to say that every child has experienced trauma, but what research has shown, and again, this presentation is based on research, is that many have. So here you're seeing, 2/3 of children have reported at least one traumatic event. Estimated waiting in community. Maybe you also have data about your specific area that's relevant to the context of the youth that your program is working with. So think about that, and again, making that connection. And again, reminding mentors that while this is true, mentors are not therapists. They're not, trauma practice conditioners. They're not here to treat symptoms. We're talking about building relationships, and really we're talking about the power of relationships to heal. So again, this is just the straight definition for mentors who may not be informed about trauma-informed care. What is it? How can it look? How does it make people feel? And where does it occur and in what context? So if you're not familiar with that, let us know so we can expand. But if you're not familiar, maybe it might be time for you and your program to get more familiar with it so you can convey that information to mentors. 3 E's of trauma, to kind of see it more succinctly, the event, the experience, which I always want to make the note that the experience of trauma is very different per person. In the same family with people who went through the same event, the experience of the individuals can be totally different. So not just talking about the event, but we're talking about, individual experiences, and that when mentors are connecting with their mentees, they're acknowledging that. Maybe they did have a similar event, but you don't want to over-relate and assume that your experience was the same because you experienced the same event. So that's really important to communicate here, again, about that individualized experience as it relates to trauma. And then again, the effects, because we're talking about youth development, and we'll go into that on the next slide, but the impacts of trauma are real, and we want to, and because youth are developing and changing, those impacts become even more important to know about and for mentors to think about if they've not thought about it before. So again, the potential effects of trauma, these are all things that youth are dealing with as they're growing up, because their brains are changing, their boundaries, they're developing boundaries and figuring out what that means. They're figuring out how to develop trust and build relationships. So relationship building, their sense of future. So it's often said a lot in Baltimore City that because there's a lot of shared trauma here, that you have a really hard time seeing forward and thinking about 5 years from now versus in the moment. So thinking about that, it's something that kids already struggle with because they've not spent much time here on earth with us. But trauma can even affect that even more. Behavior and social relationships, obviously, dealing with changes and educational performance. So how they deal with school, things like that. All those things can be led back to trauma for sure. Excuse me. So trauma can be overlooked, and we want to make sure that we're not overlooking and reminding mentors to do it. So we have a few questions for you to ask mentors here. How do you think as a mentor you do nurture possibilities? So I make this as relevant to the mentor experience, because it can be overwhelming to hear about things like trauma. I want to remind them that it's important to know about, not to say that you are going to end the experiences of trauma for young people that you work with. But what is your role, and what can you do as a mentor, and how can you support? Because the other side of that is the mentor is not the only person of support for that child, and we want to communicate that to mentors as well. Again, those things to remember, what happened when we are observing behavior, what things might be symptoms. It's, because the child has adapted to their situation. And then how do we heal in relationships, not just in mental relationships, but the more caring adults. We know from research, the more caring adults that a child has in their life, the more likely for positive outcomes for that child. So that's really important. And we want mentors to remember that they do have a role, even if it's not the savior type role. So here we do have a video. I'm going to try to play. Oh, I can't play. Can I play it? Yes. I'm going to play this video for you. It's just a few minutes long. And again, maybe this could be an opportunity for you to insert if your organization has a video or something more relevant to your exact situation. But this is a bit general about the long-term effects of mentoring. And then let me know in the chat if this isn't playing correctly. Everybody here?
It's just hard with that. I was just a kid. Because here everybody knew our business, knew what was happening to us, and it was brutal. Oh my God, there's a school. If you go right up here, there's a turn, and you can situate it.
It's a tough thing back here.
Yeah. This is crazy. There were some good times though, we'd have a good 30 minutes or so before we heard the sliding glass door open. And one day he came in and he actually had pizza, like supreme pizza. And another day, it was fine. And another day he came in, for no reason, he just smashed my mom's head against that cabinet there. Just thinking of, just to the left of where they're playing, it's where my brother and I would play. My dad, he would come home and we had to be really good at sports and stuff, so. There's one time where we were sitting, I knew it was coming. I knew my brother, Bobby, I knew that he would be the one to bear the brunt of it. And so I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Chad reminds me of a lot of the kids that come through here. Angry, very angry. And you could tell he just didn't want to connect with anybody. And you could tell he was hiding something. He always came in with a nervous stomach. My stomach hurts. And he finally came clean and told me his father had major anger issues. He said, I need to talk to somebody. And I instantly thought of Coach Morrow.
Chad wasn't a football player per se. He was just a kid that had energy that needed to do something. He needed to be a part of something. because I don't think he had anyone as a role model or someone showing him what to do. On the whistle,
Coach Morrow was the only person I really trusted in this town. He was always there.
yeah. There was times I would give him a ride home. We would talk, sometimes we wouldn't talk. But it was interesting to have a discussion with someone, a young man who had no one to talk to.
He was the only one there for my graduation. Even my family wasn't there.
You're doing good. You're okay.
I just remember when you were walking across, I just remember looking up. He had this big old, just ear to ear grin.
It takes a village to raise a child. And it doesn't matter what nationality, what race, we're all from the human race. If you interact with someone, it shows them that you care.
Good memories, you know? You gotta hold on to those.
It's love thy neighbor. It's what we should do.
When's the last time you saw him?
About 8 years ago. And actually, right over here is Lucille's barbecue. The best barbecue you'll ever have in your life. And Coach Morrow actually took me there, like after high school graduation. But take this right. It's gonna be your first right over there. Just pull in, not this one, but. I freaking knew it. I freaking knew it. I did too. I knew something was up.
No,
I knew something with that. I knew it. I knew you all doing something.
no, you didn't really. There he is.
I heard you were in town. I knew you couldn't pass up some Lucille's, man. Oh, good to see you. I'm so proud of you. Done well. Done well.
Yeah, so that is a great video that kind of connects to the experience of trauma as well as the power of a mentor, for a child who has experienced trauma. Cool. Again, I keep talking about the power of mentoring, the power of caring, consistent adults. This is what any research about mentoring is about, this, and it's about the power of those relationships. So as it relates specifically to trauma, we're talking about reducing stress, building resiliency, which is like the number one thing a child can have to deal with trauma. If you're interested in trauma research, literally reducing level hormones and stress hormones, and what adults what they can do, celebrate that child, comfort them, listen, collaborate with, and inspire young people. So this again is that power of a mentor, and mentors will want to know in this kind of thing what could be the impact of the work that they're about to get involved in. So this is your time to let them know that the research says that this is a great use of an adult's time. So really get them bought in. Approaches to mentoring. And again, you might have your own specific approach to talk about here, but we're going to talk about some kind of general approaches. What to avoid and what to do. So the prescriptive approach, this is also a form of saviorism, which we will talk a little bit about later. It's kind of that idea, there's something wrong with you and I'm the doctor and I'm here to fix it. So this approach can be really harmful to youth and can layer on different additional kind of power dynamics. And power dynamics are something that we always want to be talking about, especially when we're talking about relationships between adults and children. So we want to be really mindful that mentors are not using this approach. And that we're disrupting it now before they even make contact with students. The strengths-based approach, I'm sure many of you have heard of. So this is the opposite of that, obviously. Talk about strength-based, developmental-based, requiring the mentor to focus on the assets of the mentees that they have within themselves and the assets of their community as well. So there is another in the facilitation guide, another resource for you to look at and share, and extra resources for supplemental trainings about the strength-based approach and the developmental approach. So definitely useful and a great thing to talk about after we've just talked about trauma, which can seem really deficit-y. We want to, again, focus on strengths and bring back to that. And then cultivating supportive relationships. Empathy is really important, and the difference between empathy and sympathy, but literally we're just going to talk about empathy here. Getting mentors up to speed about this. I'm sure many of you are. And then, have people seen this video, the Brene Brown video about empathy? I feel like everyone's seen it. Okay, so since this is only 2.5 minutes, we will share this. It is like so choice. It's so good.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to share the video with those who haven't seen it. I love it. It's a great tool. And you want to make sure that you're debriefing it with your mentors afterwards. So kind of see, had they had this experience, the at leasting, I feel like everyone has experience. So gives them some time to kind of debrief what they heard, and remind them the first step in showing empathy is listening. And then we're going to get into active listening in these next slides. Cool. So reflective listening or active listening, really important for the toolkit. Okay. And the many ways that we show that we're listening, body language, responding back with things that you're hearing, making sure that you're communicating that you are paying attention, and feeling expressed in the other person's communication. So reflective listening or active listening. I think a lot of programs have their own ways that they talk about this, but this is a resource for you to do it. And then some actual examples, which again, mentors will love examples and those hard things they can take away. It sounds like, it seems as if, it feels as though, and it also goes hand in hand with an actual activity for them to practice this, which is another thing that is really important for these trainings, to give them the opportunity to practice again before they're interacting with youth. So for this, breaking people into group, let somebody talk for 2 whole minutes, and then reflecting back and using those reflective listening. So what was it like to just listen for that long? How did it feel to pause and re-ask for questions? Did you find yourself wanting to give advice and stopping yourself? Really, the reflective listening and that empathy video will really help inform their practice and how they try it out. So give them the opportunity to really debrief through that, because this will be their first kind of practical application of what they're learning so far. Open-ended and closed-ended questions. So open-ended questions allow someone to give a free-form answer. Closed-ended can just be yes or no. This is really important for mentors, because kids will, depending on how they're feeling, maybe super open, or maybe every opportunity there's a closed question, close it down. Because some kids will hear a closed question and talk just because they're just chatty Cathy. So we want to help mentors to realize how to, again, set up those open-ended questions so they can keep conversation going, because one of their concerns is going to be, what if this kid doesn't want to talk to me? So this is their opportunity to have a tool in their toolkit to work through that. And then again, another practical. So some examples, if you have real life examples to share here too, please do. Mentors will appreciate the realness of that, but these are some really basic ones. Again, challenging with the open and closed response. So if you want to add your own or propose your own that aren't on the slide to see what they can come up with, that's another activity as well that can help them kind of sort through open and closed-ended questions. Boundaries, really, really important. We want to talk about this, before they even have a relationship to set boundaries in. So because when relationships are getting started, boundaries are too loose, they could be misinterpreted. If they're too rigid, they can halt the growth of a relationship. So we want to talk about it as much as possible on the front end before they're even in a relationship with their mentee. Types of boundaries. So physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, material boundaries, and time boundaries. So mentors will be protective of their time like all adults are. So that expectation of contact and things like that we talked earlier goes into time boundaries, material boundaries. So again, if you have procedures and policies about gifts and things like that, that is important. Emotional and intellectual boundaries. So challenging mentors to consider those things and what they want to share and what they don't want to share, because it's also fine not to share everything just because a kid asks you. And anybody who works with kids know that kids will ask lots and lots and lots of questions, whether you want to answer them or not. So letting mentors know that it's okay to draw those boundaries, especially in the beginning of a relationship where they want to build familiarity and things like that. It's still okay and important to have those boundaries as well. And then also they need to respect the child's boundaries as well. Because our mentors will be trying to get to know them and want to be asking them questions, and a child might say that's not your business, and that's okay too. And then physical boundaries as well. There's standards of safety about physical boundaries. Can I hug my mentee or not? That might be up to you and your program and your school. So addressing those things here will be important. How to set boundaries. What should I share? What shouldn't I share? Right. Is it okay to hug? So young people learn how to set boundaries by watching others. So it will be beneficial to the mentee to see their mentor firmly setting boundaries and doing so in a kind way. And then here, we also want to be non-judgmental when we're interacting with our mentee and setting boundaries. So a young person may use language that a mentor finds offensive. So mentors would need to remember that language has been learned elsewhere. Instead of labeling things as good and bad, mentors should address, I'm uncomfortable when you use that language. That's my personal boundary, is that I don't use that language, and would ask their mentee not to use it while they're together. So considering that too, that they can draw their boundaries. No, what is happening? That's okay to draw their boundaries to protect themselves as well, but drawing boundaries doesn't need to be harsh or a roadblock, which we're about to talk about. Roadblocks. So again, now that we've given them those tools, we want to get them thinking about roadblocks so they can figure out how to avoid them. So this visual represents what we see about each other on the surface, which I don't know how big your screen is, but at the top, it's hanging above the water, you know, skin color, race, gender, age, and then all the things about people. The depth of who we actually are is below the surface, and we cannot necessarily see it. So cultural humility is acknowledging that our culture and experiences in life can be very different from someone else. And this is really important to authentic relationships. So while we may relate on some of these things, you know, we're a similar age, we're the same gender, we are the same race. When mentors maybe feel compelled to connect on those things, there's all these other things that feed into who we are. And we need to get to know each other authentically so we can communicate. So, you know, rather than judging each other, we want to channel and cultivate a sense of curiosity about each other and explore each other's experiences and each other's cultures. So again, letting mentors know that they might be seeing their mentee 1 hour a week. How many hours are in a week that they're not with them, and that their mentee is living a life that they need to get to know about in a kind and open way. So this is a really good representation of that. And there's possible activities. So we're kind of getting into some of the enhancements now. So again, if it doesn't serve you to do this in that 101, these are really opportunities to supplement further on, because you could talk about this cultural iceberg literally all day. So, but it is a good introductory image to get talking about it. So implicit bias, for those who've never done like the implicit bias test, it's linked here. We want to talk about bias because the nature of working with somebody new and working with a child is going to bring up things that we've already made assumptions about our own childhood experiences, and that will undoubtedly affect how you may interact with your mentee. So these are opportunities, or the things listed here and that test, are opportunities for mentors to kind of do that self-exploration and mitigate any potential negative consequences that could arise from bias. And there's a little bit more in depth in the facilitation guide than what's just on this slide. So definitely be sure to read all the way through that and get familiar with it while you're communicating it. And again, self-exploration is really like the most important thing as far as disrupting potential bias. So these questions are an opportunity to get mentors talking about it and to, again, to disrupt. And this is an opportunity for you to kind of determine what your motivations are of these prospective mentors, what their intentions are. And again, possible red flags can kind of come up when we're starting to talk about these conversations. So keep that in mind. And then hopefully, you know, your program will have opportunities for that self-exploration and be encouraging of it, because rather than, again, if somebody's coachable and willing to learn, this is a great opportunity for them to do that with you introducing, you know, these topics to them. Cool. So adultism, which again could be a whole nother training, but we want to address it here because it is a form of bias. So adultism is the assumption that young people are inferior to adults simply because of their age. Adults often act on this assumption by limiting young people's access to decision-making, information, resources, their rights, their opportunity to voice their thoughts. And these are the 5 concepts of adultism. So I would ask you guys, I mean, I would hope that you would see this as relevant. When I learned about adultism, I was like, oh no, and you know, realized my own like practice of this. So it's something that's worth exploring. Again, this would be just a basic introduction to it and a way for you to get conversations starting with your mentors. But this could be something that we can talk about in the future as well, or in a supplementary training. And we do want to start talking about saviorism and just white saviorism. So last week I did implement a training about white saviorism, and we'll be doing, Mentor Maryland DC will likely be doing one later this year, November, December. So keep an eye on our training calendar for that, because it is, I mean, that's a whole training just about these next 2 slides. So this is a huge topic, and not just white saviorism, but saviorism in general. But you know, white saviorism is a white person acting excuse me, acting to help a person of color with a self-serving motivation. Again, talking about motivations to appear noble or courageous or morally superior to other white people, including the underlying beliefs, you know, that bias that people of color need saving and white people are the most qualified and capable of saving them. So it can be an uncomfortable topic. So maybe it doesn't serve your program to talk about it here, but it's, again, good for mentors to do that self-exploration or behind their motivation, and to maybe, once they might figure that out, that maybe their motivations are not so pure, what's the name for that and how do we disrupt it? Because as you see here in the cycle serves itself. So these are some of those narratives around the white savior narratives of mentoring that you may hear at funding events, or how, again, when we talk about how we talk about youth, we want to make sure that we're not using these kind of savior narratives. So for mentors to see it here written so plainly will help them disrupt it and avoid it as much as possible. And potentially this is because they're seeing it here, and can be an application where they will hopefully feel comfortable asking questions about it as it relates to your program and how it relates to their time in your program. They're having conversations about it with your BIPOC mentees. So we actually, I think in mentoring month this year, did a whole training about this. It's on, the recording is on our website. So if you want your mentors to go check it out, or if you want to check it out to learn more about it, please feel free to do that. But acknowledging race is the absolutely bare minimum for when we're talking about building cross-race mentoring relationships. So again, acknowledging race validates a young person's lived experience. And when we do not acknowledge it, it does the exact opposite. It devalues it, and it's as if it's not important or affects anything, which we just know isn't true. So we want mentors to know that we're understanding that this is something that we're acknowledging, and that we want to do it in a way that is productive, which we will talk about here. How do we do it? That we should do it, but how do we do it? Being open, being understanding, and being vulnerable. Again, going back to how authenticity is a really important aspect for building relationships with strong foundations. That can start here. So not just in conversations about race, but about everything, but specifically about race. Again, being open, understanding, and vulnerable. And we find that when people are open and understanding and vulnerable, that it does, provide our young people with that validation that they need of their experiences, and for their own identity as well, if we go into more in that white saviorism training as well. So we are approaching the end of our time. This would be the end of the training for your peeps. These are additional references should your mentors want to look into them, or if you want to look into them. So how we are planning to move forward for this now is to, after this training, get these resources to you, which is this slide deck, the skeletal slide deck, and the facilitation guide, as well as the recording of this training. In the future, these might be available on our website as well. So just keep it, we'll be communicating about that. And we do, if you know another program or have another colleague that needs to come to this training, we're doing it again in 2 weeks on July 29th. So please feel free to join us. So Annabelle, yeah, we're going to send this slide deck out to you via email, but in the future, it should be on our website. Any questions before I go into the super wrap up? All right, people feel like this is meeting needs. We're feeling good about that? Okay, cool. So just some things that are going on at Mentor Maryland DC. Like we heard, we are expanding into DC. We're there, it's happening. We still have some of our DC town halls left. So if you are a DC program or know a DC program, please send an invitation to our town halls. This is our opportunity to kind of get a feel for what the state of mentoring is in DC and to hear directly from programs. We've been working in DC informally for years, but now we're really there. We want to make that as effective as possible. Additionally, yesterday we released our strategic plan for the next 5 years. We are super excited about it, and we are doing forums across the state of Maryland virtually through the end of August. So if you see your area, geographic region listed here, for Baltimore City, we're encouraging all of Central MD to attend, but we have an open forum as well. Go to our website, mentormddc.org/strategic plan, and register for the one in your area. This is your opportunity for us to release a strategic plan, get you guys caught up on what it's all about and what it means for your specific region. So we are super excited about that. And it literally just happened. So after a lot of work, so we're excited. So thank you guys for coming. We ended about 5 minutes early, which is nice. Any questions, feel free to stay on or drop in the chat. I appreciate you guys being here. And again, look for an email from me or Dakota before the end of this week with all these resources. And again, you know, if you know anybody who could benefit from this training or these resources, send them the link to our July 29th occasion. We'll be doing this again. So yeah, guys, thank you so much and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
See you guys.
Thank you.